In the heart of the bustling music industry, where melodies danced through the air and creativity thrived, stood a power couple whose names echoed across charts and concert halls, Mary and Dan. They weren't just musicians, they were a phenomenon. With each passing day, their bond seemed to grow stronger, intertwined with their shared passion for music, a force that propelled them to the forefront of the scene. Mary, with her ethereal voice and magnetic stage presence, had a way of captivating audiences that few could rival. Her songs were infused with raw emotion, often drawing from her own experiences, making each note resonate deeply with listeners. Dan, on the other hand, was a virtuoso in his own right. His guitar skills were legendary, and his knack for songwriting complemented Mary's artistry perfectly. Together, they were a symphony of talent, a blend of melodies and harmonies that brought their fans to their feet. Their rise to fame wasn't a mere stroke of luck, it was a result of relentless dedication and countless hours spent in dimly lit studios. Experimenting with sounds, writing lyrics, and perfecting their craft. They had started as two hopefuls, performing at local bars and open mic nights, their dreams flickering like candle flames. But soon enough, their undeniable chemistry caught the attention of a renowned producer, launching them into the spotlight. As they toured the country, each concert became a celebration of their love for music and each other. The stage was their sanctuary, a place where they shared their dreams and fears through song. Fans adored their playful banter, the way they exchanged glances that spoke volumes, and how they seamlessly transitioned between soulful ballads and upbeat anthems. The energy between them was electric, it felt as though they were communicating in a language all their own. One memorable night, while performing at a sold-out venue in Los Angeles, the audience sang along, drowning out the music with their collective voice. Mary and Dan exchanged knowing smiles, and in that moment, they knew they had reached something extraordinary. The cheers echoed long after the last note faded, a testament to their hard work and the connection they had forged with their fans. Behind the scenes, however, was a different story. The pressures of fame began to seep into their lives, creating cracks in their once perfect facade. Late-night recording sessions blurred into early morning rehearsals, and the world of bright lights and flashing cameras began to take its toll. Yet, amidst the chaos, they always found solace in each other. Whether it was a quiet moment shared over coffee in a hotel room or a spontaneous late-night jam session, those small instances reminded them of the bond that had brought them together in the first place. They were not just partners on stage, they were best friends. They celebrated each other's successes, supported one another during the tough times, and pushed each other to be better artists. Mary admired Dan's relentless pursuit of excellence, while he cherished her unwavering passion for creating music that touched the hearts of many. Their relationship seemed enviable, a perfect blend of love and artistry. But as they stood on the precipice of their greatest success, little did they know that the harmony they had built together was about to face its most significant challenge. For now, however, they were living the dream, basking in the glow of their achievements, and fueling each other's creative flames. Their story was still being written, and the world was watching, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. As the whirlwind of their rising stardom continued, Dan began to notice subtle shifts in Mary's behavior. It was as if a curtain had drawn between them, leaving him on one side, peering in with growing concern and confusion. It started innocently enough. Late-night rehearsals that stretched longer than usual, cryptic texts that she would hastily swipe away whenever he entered the room, and an air of distraction that seemed to envelop her like a shroud. At first, Dan dismissed his unease as a product of the stress that came with their burgeoning careers. They were both working harder than ever, juggling studio sessions, promotional events, and the constant demands of their fans. But as weeks passed, the little things that once felt like charming quirks began to morph into unsettling signs. Mary had always been open and lively, sharing her thoughts and feelings without hesitation. Now, she often seemed preoccupied, lost in her world. Dan vividly remembered one evening after a particularly grueling rehearsal. The studio was dimly lit, the walls adorned with posters of their past shows, echoing their triumphs. As he packed up his guitar, he noticed Mary lingering by the window, her phone in hand. She was texting, and there was a certain tension in her posture, a tightness around her shoulders that struck Dan as unusual. When he casually asked her about her messages, she flashed a quick smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I was just checking in with the team," she replied, her tone light but her gaze shifting away. You know how it is, always something to manage. That response felt off to Dan. They had always prided themselves on their transparency, and now it felt as if walls were being erected between them. He brushed it off, convincing himself it was merely the pressure of their lifestyle. Yet, each time they were apart, the nagging feeling of doubt intensified. Days turned into weeks, and the signs kept mounting. Mary began arriving late to rehearsals, claiming she was caught up in discussions with their producer, Josh. Dan's instincts flared with suspicion. Josh had always been a close ally. But the way Mary spoke about him had changed. There was an excitement in her voice that Dan hadn't heard in a long time, a lilt that made his stomach churn. One evening, after a long day of recording, Dan found himself in the living room of their shared apartment, scrolling through his phone. He caught a glimpse of Mary's phone lying on the coffee table, face up, with a notification from Josh's number lighting up the screen. It was just a simple message. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." But it felt like a punch to the gut. Determined to push the uneasy thoughts aside, Dan tried to focus on writing new music, but the tension was palpable. Every time he tried to engage Mary in conversation, he was met with vague responses and distracted glances. It was as if he was competing for her attention with a phantom presence, and the more he tried to connect, the more she withdrew. The turning point came one fateful night. Mary had been unusually late returning home, and when she finally arrived, Dan was overwhelmed by a mix of anxiety and irritation. He had waited for hours, pacing the apartment as doubt clawed at his mind. When she walked in, her laughter echoed, bright but jarring. It was almost too cheerful, too practiced. "Hey, you won't believe the new song I've been working on with Josh," she exclaimed, her enthusiasm cutting through his frustration like a knife. Unable to contain his emotions any longer, Dan confronted her. "Mary, why do you keep spending so much time with him? I feel like you're slipping away from me." Her face fell, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the mask of joy crack, revealing a flicker of uncertainty. "It's just work, Dan. You know how it is." But he couldn't shake the feeling. That night, while she was in the shower, he decided to take a look at her phone. Just a glance, he told himself he was only being cautious. His heart raced as he navigated through her messages, each one confirming his worst fears. Then he saw it. A thread of messages between Mary and Josh laid bare the intimacy of their conversations. They exchanged playful banter, inside jokes, and flirty comments that pierced Dan's heart like daggers. One message stood out starkly: "I can't stop thinking about you. When can we see each other again?" The world around him spun, and the air felt thick and suffocating. He felt his chest tighten, an overwhelming wave of betrayal crashing over him. The realization settled in like a lead weight: the woman he loved, his partner in music and life, was being unfaithful. The anguish of that truth was suffocating. And for a moment, he felt utterly lost. Dan slumped onto the couch, his mind racing with disbelief. Memories of their laughter, the love songs they wrote together, and the dreams they shared felt tainted by this revelation. The woman he had built his life with was entangled in a secret world with Josh. A world he had no place in. It was as if the vibrant colors of their shared journey faded to gray, leaving only shadows of what once was. When Mary emerged from the shower, Dan was still on the couch, his heart heavy with pain and confusion. She looked at him, her eyes sparkling with that familiar warmth, but now it felt like a lie. He knew that their perfect harmony had been shattered, and he was left to grapple with the haunting reality of betrayal. In the weeks that followed his painful discovery, Dan found himself at a crossroads. The raw emotions swirling inside him, anger, betrayal, and heartache, felt insurmountable. He could have easily succumbed to despair, confronting Mary in a fit of rage or trying to reason with her. But deep down, he knew that wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he chose to channel his pain into something powerful, something that would not only express his feelings but also deliver a message to everyone around him. The idea of organizing a music festival began to take shape in his mind, a vision that ignited a flicker of purpose within him. This wouldn't be just any festival, it would be a platform for him to unveil a new song. A song that would encapsulate the depths of his betrayal and the complexity of his emotions. He envisioned the crowd gathered in front of him, their eyes fixed on him as he poured his heart out on stage. It was a chance for catharsis, for exposing the truth, and for reclaiming his narrative. As the days went by, the festival idea morphed into a plan. Dan set the wheels in motion, reaching out to contacts in the industry and enlisting help from friends. He envisioned a lineup that would draw in their fans, people who had once cheered them on as a couple. This would be his moment, not just to confront Mary and Josh indirectly, but to allow himself to heal and move forward. He decided to hold the festival at an iconic venue they had performed at together, a place rich with memories but now tainted by the shadow of his heartbreak. The day after he finalized the venue, he began writing the song that would become the centerpiece of the festival. Sitting alone in his dimly lit studio, Dan picked up his guitar and let his fingers dance across the strings, searching for the right chords to accompany the tumult of emotions inside him. Each note felt like a release, a way to transform his anguish into something beautiful. He started with the lyrics, letting the words flow freely from his heart. The song began as a haunting melody, reflecting the sorrow and betrayal that now haunted him. He poured out his feelings, the pain of realizing that the person he had trusted most had deceived him. Lines emerged that captured his disbelief, anger, and the bitter taste of betrayal. But there was also irony woven into the fabric of the song. Dan wanted to showcase not just his hurt but the absurdity of the situation. The juxtaposition of their love story, a tale that had seemed so perfect, against the backdrop of deception was something he aimed to highlight. Each lyric was crafted to strike a chord, aiming to resonate not just with his own experience but with anyone who had ever felt the sting of betrayal. As he continued to write, Dan found himself revisiting memories, both good and bad. He recalled moments of laughter shared on tour, quiet evenings spent creating music, and the intimate conversations that had once brought them so close together. But those memories now felt like ghosts, overshadowed by the reality of Mary's infidelity. He infused the song with imagery that would paint a vivid picture for the audience, making them feel the weight of his emotions. He wrote of the contrast between the spotlight that once shone on their relationship and the darkness that now loomed over him. The chorus began to take shape, a powerful refrain that echoed his feelings of betrayal while simultaneously reclaiming his strength. Each time he strummed the guitar, he felt more connected to the truth of his experience, allowing the song to transform from a source of pain into a declaration of resilience. As the days melted into nights, Dan dedicated himself to this project, pouring every ounce of his soul into the music. The festival loomed on the horizon, and with each passing day, his anticipation grew. He envisioned the crowd before him, their faces illuminated by the stage lights, hanging on his every word. The thought fueled him, transforming his heartbreak into a driving force that pushed him forward. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about healing. Dan realized that by sharing his truth with the world, he was taking control of his narrative, using his talent to rise above the betrayal that had once threatened to consume him. The festival would be his catharsis, a celebration of moving forward while unmasking the truth behind the facade of his life with Mary. With each passing hour, he felt stronger and more resolved. This was his moment, a chance to reclaim his voice and assert his identity as an artist. And as the final notes of his song echoed through his mind, he knew he was ready to face whatever lay ahead, with the strength of his music guiding him. The day of the festival arrived, and the air buzzed with excitement and anticipation. The venue, an open-air amphitheater nestled in a picturesque part of the city, was a hub of energy, filled with throngs of music lovers eager to witness the unfolding spectacle. Colorful banners adorned the entrance, and the scent of delicious food wafted through the air, mingling with the melodies played by local bands on smaller stages scattered throughout the grounds. As Dan walked through the festival grounds, he could feel the palpable energy surging around him. Friends, fans, and familiar faces filled the crowd, their laughter and chatter creating a harmonious backdrop to the day's events. He felt a mix of exhilaration and nerves. This was his moment to shine. A chance to reclaim his narrative and assert his identity after the pain of betrayal. The lineup for the festival was impressive, featuring a mix of emerging artists and well-known musicians, all drawn by Dan's talent and reputation. Each performance leading up to Dan's set had the audience entranced, with every act showcasing their unique style and artistry. The camaraderie among the artists was evident, hugs and high fives were exchanged backstage, while fans cheered loudly, celebrating the spirit of music that united them all. But beneath the surface of this joyous celebration lay an undercurrent of tension. Dan had been careful to keep the details of his new song under wraps, But the whispers among fans and industry insiders hinted at something deeper, something personal. There was an unspoken anticipation for what Dan would unveil. As dusk approached, the stage lights illuminated the venue, casting a warm glow over the crowd. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the atmosphere shifted, filled with an electric buzz. Dan's heart raced as he prepared to take the stage, knowing that tonight he would lay bare his soul before everyone watching. The festival had turned into more than just a musical event, it had become a cathartic experience, both for him and for those who had come to witness his journey. Dan stepped into the spotlight, and the crowd erupted into applause. He could feel their energy washing over him, their support propelling him forward. In that moment, he was no longer just the heartbroken artist. He was a survivor, transformed by his experiences and ready to share his truth. He took a deep breath, letting the atmosphere envelop him, grounding himself before he began. With the first strum of his guitar, silence fell over the audience. They leaned in, eager to hear the words that would flow from his heart. The opening chords of his song echoed through the amphitheater, resonating with the weight of his emotions. Dan poured everything he had into his performance, weaving a tale of betrayal and heartache, but also of resilience and strength. As the song progressed, Dan's voice filled the air with haunting melodies, each word deliberate and charged with emotion. He sang about the dreams they had shared, the laughter that had once united them, and the painful betrayal that now stood between him and Mary. The lyrics painted vivid images of the love he had lost, the disbelief that had consumed him, and the strength he had found in the face of adversity. In the crowd, Mary and Josh stood side by side, their expressions shifting from amusement to discomfort as the song unfolded. The weight of Dan's words hung heavy in the air, and as he sang about their betrayal, they exchanged nervous glances, the realization of their actions crashing down upon them like a wave. Mary felt her face flush with embarrassment as the truth of Dan's lyrics sank in. The details he wove into the song felt like daggers aimed directly at her, each line a reminder of her infidelity. The audience, once oblivious to the backstory behind the performance, now began to understand the emotional turmoil that had inspired Dan's music. Whispers rippled through the crowd, a mixture of sympathy and shock as they grasped the depth of the situation. Dan's performance crescendoed, his voice rising with passion as he reached the climax of the song. The music swelled, reflecting the tempest of emotions he had channeled into his art. In that moment, he felt liberated, as if shedding the weight of his past while embracing the catharsis of the present. His pain transformed into strength, and he reveled in the power of his music to convey the truth. As the final notes lingered in the air, a profound silence enveloped the venue. The audience stood transfixed, their hearts echoing with the weight of Dan's revelation. And then, slowly but surely, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause, cheers ringing out as they recognized the bravery it took for him to share such personal pain with them. It was a moment of solidarity, a collective acknowledgement of the human experience, of love, loss, and resilience. In the crowd, Mary's heart raced as she processed the intensity of Dan's performance. Shame washed over her as she realized the magnitude of what she had done. She glanced at Josh, who stood beside her, his expression reflecting a mixture of surprise and guilt. They were both caught off guard by the raw honesty that Dan had laid bare on stage, and in that moment, the facade of their affair began to crumble. As the cheers echoed around them, Dan took a moment to absorb the support from the crowd. Feeling the weight of their empathy lifting him higher, he had turned his heartbreak into art, and it resonated deeply with those who had come to witness his journey. As the applause continued, Dan knew that he had not only reclaimed his narrative but had also found a new sense of identity, a musician who had faced the darkest moments of life and emerged stronger on the other side. Mary and Josh stood there, exposed and vulnerable, realizing that the walls they had built to protect themselves were now crumbling under the weight of Dan's truth. The crowd's reaction served as a mirror, reflecting their choices and forcing them to confront the reality they had tried to hide from. The atmosphere crackled with intensity as Dan took a final bow, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where he would rise from the ashes of betrayal, stronger than ever before. As the final notes of Dan's song faded into the night, a palpable shift enveloped the amphitheater. The crowd, once united in applause, began to murmur among themselves, the excitement of the performance giving way to a charged atmosphere of realization and speculation. Whispers rippled through the audience like an electric current, each person processing the raw emotion they had just witnessed in different ways. Initially, the applause had been deafening, echoing off the walls of the venue as Dan took his bow. But now, curiosity mingled with confusion, sparking conversations that crescendoed into a din. People leaned in closer to one another, exchanging knowing glances and hushed comments. Some spectators began to piece together the emotional narrative woven throughout the song, connecting the dots between Dan's heartfelt lyrics and the love triangle that had been exposed on stage. "Is he talking about Mary?" one fan asked incredulously, her voice barely rising above the ambient noise. "Could it be Josh?" another replied, pointing subtly towards the duo standing awkwardly at the edge of the crowd. The realization spread like wildfire, igniting waves of shock and disbelief. The audience, once swept up in the exhilaration of the festival, now found themselves grappling with the reality of the situation. Gasps filled the air as more and more people began to recognize the characters in Dan's painful story. The intimate details of his lyrics seemed to echo their own experiences with love and betrayal, transforming the performance from mere entertainment into a profound shared moment. A cluster of fans, having connected the dots, turned to face Mary and Josh, their expressions a mix of sympathy and incredulity. The whispers escalated, some voices tinged with disbelief while others radiated a sense of support for Dan. "I can't believe she would do that to him," one girl murmured to her friend, shaking her head in disbelief. "Look at them, they look so uncomfortable," another chimed in, her eyes fixed on Mary and Josh. The couple stood just a few feet away, their faces flushed and eyes darting nervously around as they became the center of attention. Mary, caught in the crossfire of judgment and scrutiny, felt the weight of the crowd's gaze like an anchor pulling her down. The cheers that had once filled her with pride now felt distant and hollow, overshadowed by the penetrating stares and whispers that swirled around her. She couldn't shake the feeling of being exposed, her secret laid bare for everyone to see. Josh, standing next to her, shared her discomfort. His face was a mask of shock and regret, processing the fallout of their choices as the reality of the moment set in. He glanced at Mary, their eyes locking for a fleeting second, filled with unspoken words and a shared understanding of the mess they had created. The camaraderie they once shared now felt strained, as if the very foundation of their relationship was crumbling beneath the weight of Dan's performance. As the whispers grew louder, a group of Dan's friends, sensing the tension, stepped forward to support him. "He deserves better," one shouted, rallying those around him. The chant caught on, a powerful declaration that resonated with many who had witnessed the betrayal unfold. The crowd began to shift, some rallying behind Dan while others continued to cast accusatory glances toward Mary and Josh. "Boo, you too," someone yelled, their voice piercing through the murmurs. It was a simple yet potent statement, a collective judgment that reverberated across the amphitheater. More voices joined in, the audience turning into a living organism, pulsating with energy, rallying behind Dan's pain. Mary's heart raced as she took in the scene. She had always been the star, the one in the spotlight, and now she felt like a pariah, exposed and vulnerable. The once adoring fans who had cheered for her now turned their backs, choosing instead to align themselves with Dan, whose authenticity shone brighter than any facade she had built. "Maybe we should leave," Josh murmured, his voice barely audible above the chaos. The suggestion hung in the air, but Mary hesitated, torn between wanting to escape the harsh reality and the instinct to stand her ground. She glanced back at the stage, where Dan was being embraced by friends, their faces filled with pride and solidarity. He was a warrior on the battlefield of emotions, and she felt the enormity of her actions crashing over her like a tidal wave. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, a mixture of disbelief and regret pooling in her chest. "Neither can I," Josh replied, his voice low and laced with guilt. We should have just kept this professional." The irony of his words struck her hard. They had been so consumed by their desires that they hadn't considered the consequences, the lives they were affecting, the trust they were breaking. The festival, once a celebration of music and creativity, had morphed into a stark reminder of the choices they had made, and now they were left to face the fallout. As Dan soaked in the support of his friends, he glanced at the crowd, their reactions fueling his resolve. He felt empowered, standing on the precipice of a new chapter in his life. The festival had become a healing stage, a moment to reclaim not only his narrative but also his strength as an artist. And there, at the edge of the crowd, Mary and Josh stood awkwardly, the reality of their choices sinking in. The excitement that had initially surrounded the festival was now overshadowed by a tension that filled the air. At that moment, Dan had transformed from a heartbroken artist into a beacon of resilience, and the crowd recognized that transformation, standing in solidarity with him as he faced the fallout of betrayal. As the final echoes of the festival faded into the night, Dan stepped off the stage, still buzzing with adrenaline. The cheers of the crowd lingered in his ears, and the electric atmosphere filled him with a sense of victory. He had poured his heart out, and in doing so, he had not only reclaimed his narrative but also found a sense of closure he hadn't anticipated. But as he moved away from the spotlight, he could feel the heaviness of the moment approaching. His heart raced as he spotted Mary and Josh huddled together off to the side. Their faces pale and drawn. It was as if the reality of what had transpired was slowly sinking in, and Dan felt an undeniable urge to confront them. The wave of emotions that had surged during his performance began to bubble to the surface again: anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of hurt. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and marched towards them, determination etched on his face. "Dan," Mary said, her voice trembling slightly as she met his gaze. "Can we talk?" "No, we need to talk," he interrupted, his tone sharp. The crowd was beginning to disperse, and the atmosphere that had once been vibrant was now tinged with tension. Josh shifted nervously, glancing between Dan and Mary. "Look, man, it was a great show," he started, but Dan cut him off. "Great show?" Dan scoffed, the bitterness rising within him. "You think this is just about the show? This is about what you both did to me." His voice carried through the thinning crowd, drawing attention once again. Faces turned toward them, curious eyes watching the confrontation unfold. Mary took a step forward, desperation in her eyes. "Dan, please, just listen to us. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Dan echoed, incredulous. "You think betraying me is just a mistake? You made a choice, Mary. You chose to be with him." His heart raced, anger mixing with the pain he had felt for weeks. "You lied to me, right to my face, while I trusted you with everything. And for what? A fling with my producer? I didn't mean for it to happen." Mary's voice rose, a mixture of fear and frustration. It just did. I never wanted to hurt you." "Never wanted to hurt me?" Dan shouted, the hurt spilling out like a dam bursting. "Well, congratulations, you succeeded. You took everything we built together and threw it away. Do you even understand how much that hurts?" The crowd had begun to gather again, drawn by the intensity of the confrontation. Whispers circulated, the tension palpable as onlookers strained to hear every word exchange. Josh finally spoke up, attempting to defend Mary, but Dan wasn't interested in hearing any more excuses. "You don't get to speak right now. You're just as guilty as she is," he barked, turning to Josh, fury radiating from him. "You were supposed to be my friend, someone I trusted. You went behind my back like it was nothing." The tension in the air thickened, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world had come to a standstill, all eyes glued to the unfolding drama. Mary's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she looked small, cornered. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on all three of them. "Dan, we both made mistakes," Josh interjected, trying to keep his voice steady. "But this doesn't have to end like this. We can work through it." "Work through it?" Dan spat, incredulous. "How do you expect me to work through this? By pretending it never happened? By forgiving you both just because you say so?" He shook his head, frustration bubbling over. "You've shattered my trust. I don't know if I can ever look at either of you the same way again." As the emotions continued to escalate, Dan felt a moment of clarity wash over him. He realized that this confrontation, though painful, was necessary. It was a release, a way to finally confront the ghosts that had haunted him for so long. He had written that song not just to expose the truth, but to liberate himself from the shackles of betrayal. Suddenly, the shouting ceased, the crowd falling silent as Dan's anger transformed into something more introspective. He looked at Mary and Josh, taking a moment to absorb the reality of the situation. The anger still pulsed through him, but it was tempered by a sense of calm that began to take hold. In that unexpected silence, something shifted within him. The music he had poured his soul into had allowed him to release so many pent-up emotions. The very act of sharing his pain had provided him with a strange sense of clarity, a feeling of empowerment he hadn't felt before. His music had been his catharsis, and in a way, it had given him the strength to face this confrontation. "Do you know what I realized tonight?" Dan said quietly, the weight of his words lingering in the air. "I realized that I can't let you both define my worth. I'm not going to let this betrayal consume me. I'm going to rise above it." Mary's expression softened, her initial defensiveness faltering as she listened. "Dan, I never meant to hurt you. I loved you, but you didn't love me enough to be honest," he interrupted gently, his voice firm yet calm. "You chose to hide behind your mistakes instead of facing the truth. That's what hurts the most." The tension hung in the air, heavy and thick, as Dan took a step back. He had spoken his truth, and although it didn't erase the pain, it brought him a sense of relief. The confrontation had become a turning point, a moment where he could finally begin to move on. "Maybe we all need to take a step back and think about what we've done," Dan continued, his voice steadying. "I need time to process this, to figure out what I want moving forward. But right now, I'm choosing to focus on my music and my life." With that, Dan turned away, feeling the eyes of the crowd on him, their support mingling with the weight of his emotions. As he walked away from Mary and Josh, he felt lighter somehow, the burden of betrayal slowly lifting as he began to reclaim his life. The silence that had enveloped the crowd was a testament to the gravity of the moment, and he knew that, despite the pain, he was ready to embrace the new chapter that lay ahead. The amphitheater was beginning to empty. The bright lights that had once illuminated the stage now dimming as the last remnants of the crowd trickled out. Dan lingered for a moment, allowing the echoes of the evening to wash over him. The night had been a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, and ultimately, catharsis. As he stood there, he felt a strange mix of nostalgia and relief. Turning his back on the chaos of the night, Dan stepped into the cool night air. The stars twinkled above him, a blanket of hope against the darkness that had threatened to consume him. The weight of Mary and Josh's betrayal still hung heavy in his chest, but it was now coupled with a sense of determination that had been absent for far too long. He was ready to forge a new path, one that didn't include the shadows of his past. In the days that followed, Dan immersed himself in music, pouring his heart into every chord and lyric he penned. He found solace in the melodies that flowed from his guitar, each note a reminder that he was alive, that he was capable of creating beauty even in the wake of pain. He decided to channel his emotions into a new album, a project that would reflect his journey through heartbreak and healing. The creative process became a lifeline for Dan. He began to write not just about his experiences with Mary but also about resilience, growth, and the power of moving forward. His lyrics transformed from expressions of hurt into celebrations of strength, each song a testament to his resolve. He found inspiration in the most unexpected places, conversations with friends, moments of solitude, and even the laughter shared with his bandmates during late-night jam sessions. One evening, while strumming a new melody in his studio, he paused to reflect on how far he had come. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer controlled him. It had shaped him, yes, but it had also propelled him towards something greater. He was learning to embrace his worth, to prioritize his happiness above all else. The music he was creating was a reflection of that newfound understanding. With each passing day, Dan grew more confident in his ability to navigate the music industry as an artist with something to say. He began reaching out to collaborators, eager to share his vision and bring his new sound to life. He embraced the idea of vulnerability in his work, realizing that the authenticity of his experiences resonated with others who had faced similar struggles. The support he received from fans and fellow musicians alike bolstered his spirit, giving him the encouragement he needed to continue pushing forward. One afternoon, as he walked through the bustling streets of the city, he stumbled upon a small music venue that was hosting open mic nights. The thought of sharing his music in such an intimate setting filled him with a mix of excitement and nerves. It was a space where he could connect with others on a personal level, sharing his story and hearing theirs in return. He signed up to perform, eager to test the waters and see how his new material resonated with an audience. The night of his performance arrived, and Dan felt a familiar flutter of nerves in his stomach. As he stepped onto the stage, he glanced at the audience, a diverse group of music lovers, all eager for something genuine. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his journey settling into the backdrop of his mind. He strummed the first chords of his new song, the melody flowing effortlessly from his fingertips. As he sang, he poured his heart into each lyric, his voice steady and strong. The vulnerability he had once feared became his greatest strength. And the audience was captivated. They could feel the emotion in his words, the journey he had traveled to reach this moment. With every note, he could sense the connection growing, a bond formed through shared experiences and raw honesty. After the performance, Dan was met with applause and cheers, the warmth of the audience wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. He felt a sense of belonging that had been absent for so long. In that moment, he realized that he had not only moved on from the pain of his past but had also emerged stronger and more resilient. As the weeks turned into months, Dan continued to perform, each gig reinforcing his sense of purpose and identity as an artist. He began to cultivate a following, his new music resonating with listeners who were drawn to his authenticity. He was no longer the heartbroken artist, he had transformed into a storyteller, a beacon of hope for those navigating their struggles. With each new song, he poured a piece of himself into the music, sharing the lessons he had learned along the way. The past had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. Mary became a distant memory, a chapter closed as he embraced the possibilities of what lay ahead. Dan found himself at the forefront of a new project, a concept album that would delve into themes of love, loss, and self-discovery. He was excited to collaborate with other artists, to blend their stories with his, creating something powerful and meaningful. The process felt invigorating, and he approached each writing session with enthusiasm, eager to explore the depths of his emotions through his art. One day, while sitting in a cozy cafe, he reflected on how far he had come since that fateful night at the festival. The shadows of betrayal had transformed into a canvas for creativity, and he had embraced the freedom that came with self-acceptance. He had built a life that revolved around his passion, one that was no longer tainted by the pain of the past. As he took a sip of his coffee, he smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. He was ready for new challenges, for the next chapter of his life, and for the music that would continue to flow from his heart. The future was bright, and Dan was determined to embrace every moment, ready to face whatever came his way with courage and authenticity. In the end, it was the music that had saved him. It had been his refuge, his voice, and his guiding light through the darkest times. And now, with each note he played, he was not only telling his story but also inviting others to join him on this incredible journey of healing and self-discovery. Dan was ready for whatever lay ahead, knowing that he had the strength to rise above and embrace the beauty of new beginnings.